You are listening to the Small Town Big Arts podcast. I'm your host, Geoffrey Kershner, the CEO of the Academy Center of the Arts in Lynchburg, Virginia. In my own work as an arts leader, I have found it difficult to access resources for arts organizations and artists serving smaller communities. On each episode, Small Town Big Arts sets out to drive conversations and provide inspiration for those serving smaller communities through the arts. If you like what you hear, please rate and review us and share with your friends and colleagues who are working to promote the arts in smaller communities across America. You can also learn more by visiting us at smalltownbigarts.com. Well, it has been 1 year since I started Small Town Big Arts, which is kind of crazy to think about. But here we are 1 year later. And the genesis of Small Town Big Arts came out of my time helping facilitate a strategic planning process for Second Stage in Amherst, Virginia, my hometown where I grew up. Amherst is a small town, about 2,000 residents, and fantastically, it has what was a church that had closed, and we'll talk a little bit more about that with our guest today, Jesse. That church has now been converted into a community arts center for the town of Amherst, and it intersects with the county as well. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that today. But when I was working on this plan for them and with them, one of the things that I discovered was that there were very little resources for smaller community arts organizations. And seeing that, I thought, well, you know what? If it doesn't exist, maybe I should create one. So I thought a year into this project, I thought it might be good to swing back around to Second Stage and see how they're doing. And we'll talk a little bit about the strategic planning process, as well as their new leader, Jesse Shipe, who's joining me today. And just a little bit about Jessie. As a mother, Jessie found herself serving the community in many volunteer forms, particularly leading a Girl Scout troop and working for her homeowners association. Most importantly, Jessie enjoys bringing people together in various ways, serving her community and embracing fun and creative forms of entertainment, which she hopes will drive the momentum for the future of Second Stage. So Jessie, thank you so much for joining me on this year-long anniversary of Small Town Big Arts.
Yeah.
So I think to get started, if you could just share for the audience a little bit, I mentioned that Amherst is a small town, about 2,000 residents, and told a little bit about, the fact that you all are in a former church, but maybe just share a little bit with us about what Second Stage is and a little bit about the town of Amherst, the community you serve.
Sure. So Second Stage is essentially an arts and community center. We are a nonprofit, and our mission is to inspire creativity and community by providing a place where the cultural, civic, and economic vitality of Amherst County is encouraged. We strive to provide substance to our local area through quality arts programs, but also through affordable rental space and so on. As far as Amherst is concerned, we're a very small town. People still refer to our facility as a church. So still trying to.
That'll probably last for a while too, I'm sure.
Still trying to break that stigma.
I remember that my childhood home was still referred to as the previous owner's home for probably about 10 years after we lived there. So I feel like that is a thing in small town America, right?
Yeah, well, we're coming up on 10 years of being here, so maybe we're starting to break that. I don't know.
Hopefully.
Yeah, but we definitely have a small town feel. Everybody kind of knows everybody, and just trying to tap into some maybe uncharted territory here. I've had a lot of people say that they feel like Second Stage doesn't really cater to everybody. It's more of an older community or a more jazz-oriented community, but it's not. I'm not really sure where that stigma came from, but we are open to everyone and trying to prove that.
Yeah, that stigma is an interesting stigma. I mean, I think a lot of arts organizations struggle with, perhaps a impression or a former identity, and we'll talk a little bit about that for your organization as we get going here. One of the things from the strategic plan when I was working with you all, there were three primary goals that were set up, and one of the reasons that I wanted to reach out to Jesse today is Jesse's joined the organization since that planning process happened, and one of these goals was to strengthen and expand organizational activities that inspire creativity and build community. So we'll get a little bit into that community, right? If there's the stigma of an older community, but that community's expanded, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk to Jesse is that it's been very clear to me as an outsider. I'm in the city of Lynchburg, which is Amherst is in the greater area of, but we are in two different communities. Is I receive regular correspondence from I'm on the email list for the organization, and I've seen them meeting this goal that the breadth of activity and what is being offered is really expanded. At the time that I came to work with the organization, it was at a real crossroads. This was post COVID, and there was really a moment that the organization hit a bit of a wall in regards to engagement and function and activity. It had been doing pretty well and growing. My sense was prior to the pandemic, but it was very hard to come back from the pandemic. And the organization clearly needed some human resources to kind of really move that needle forward. And I'm excited to say that it looks like this goal is being met. So, Jesse, talk to me a little bit about how you have been meeting that goal. I think you deserve a lot of credit. Obviously, you've, I'm sure, had support from the board, and we can talk a little bit about that. But in order to, exist in the community, right, you have to provide some sort of value, and it's very clear that that value is being added to the community, brought to the community. So talk to me a little bit about meeting that goal and what you found when you came to Second Stage.
Well, first of all, thank you. That's incredible, and it means so much coming from you. I appreciate that. Um, I learned about Second Stage originally through the massage therapist that's here. Lonnie is wonderful, and she is such a blessing and such an integral part of what Second Stage is. But I'm a client of hers, and that's how I found out about Second Stage. And I always thought that this building was really neat, and I always wondered why there wasn't more here. Um, so I had my daughter's sweet 16 birthday party in June of last year here in the main hall, and I had four people during the event tell me that I've missed my calling. Um, I had already been thinking about getting back in the workforce from being blessed to be a stay-at-home mom. So I threw a stone and applied for the job. And after several interviews, I ended up being hired. And I knew being in it, I prayed about it, and I told God that I would, if this was the best fit for me, I would make sure that I made a difference in the community by being here. Um, so very blessed to be on that track. My biggest um, hurdles in coming in is there not being systems in place, there not being anything on the calendar, and me just running off of common sense and a desire to give opportunities to Amherst and the surrounding areas is what my drive was. Honestly,
Yeah.
it wasn't a strategic plan in the beginning. It was a why do we not we have to have something on the calendar. We have to be visible. We have to be seen. Um, it just in my circles, I can tell you that 99% of people that I communicate with on a regular basis have never heard of Second Stage. And I feel like that's you have to be known to be successful.
Yeah,
So
yeah, you have to be visible.
my biggest goal is my number one thing was publicity, and second is creating systems and having a place that is going to function and run and operate as business. And we're nonprofit, so it's even more important that we're running optimally, and that people know what we're doing.
So
Um,
along that line, Jesse, one of the things that was that came up in the strategic planning process, right, was that at that time, right, there wasn't a lot of visibility, there wasn't a lot of activity happening, and so in turn, right, the that nonprofit side of the organization, the charitable side of the organization, was also really suffering. Have you seen improvement in that area due to the visibility and the value that you all are providing now that you are out there and more people are aware?
Absolutely. There are several new systems in place, including a software system for ticketing and registrations for events. But one of the first things that we did was, there was already the Levitt AMP grant that was in place, and we were a part of that process. So getting publicity out for that was huge, and just having people see that we are an organization and we're in Amherst. Um, and then we had Amherst Community Day that brought in a ton of people. I think one of the most successful events that we've maybe ever had was Amherst's Halloween Bash. And we probably had about 1,000 people here. It was
Oh, that's
incredible.
great. That's awesome. That was not just that at the time that I was there a year ago, that was not imaginable. So that's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
that is. And we've had sold out theater programs. We have a live radio broadcast live from Rose Ridge. And I'm trying to implement a lot of programs that are monthly or quarterly programs instead of a one and done kind of thing. And that will keep people engaged. And people will know that it's happening, it's coming, and they can start looking for it. So I think that um, that's huge.
Yeah.
Success summer camps are happening right now, and trying to juggle all of the things is a little challenging, but it's so worth it.
Yeah, that came up too. I remember that during the planning process, summer camp activity came up, and here we are a year later, and you're in that.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
running. Gosh, we have 5 different summer camps going on right now.
Mhm. That's
So
yeah,
there's
and
something
it's
for everybody, and that's
well,
great.
and I think to the point you were making, right, that's cross generational. You're talking about youth that are directly there right now all summer. So this notion that this is for some sort of older baby boomer generation, and that's all this is just really not a. You're absolutely right. It's not an accurate
Right.
assessment. Um, one of the things too that came up when we were moving through the strategic planning process was that one of the things that you all provided was space for other organizations or individuals to use the space. And there was a lot of conversation that went on at that time in and around who those renters were, and there was a little bit of back and forth about whether they should or needed to be culturally focused, or organizations or businesses that were sort of oriented around the mission of the organization. And I
Right.
think that that's actually debatable somewhat, right? Whether that's absolutely necessary or not for the organization. But how is that going? How is the occupancy in the building, the different individuals that
We
rent space and
we
organizations?
are full.
Right.
Waiting list, which is phenomenal. I joke that I'm running out of corners because we've had people that need a short-term rental for just a few months. So I've been able to find them kind of a corner as their workspace, and they're so grateful. Um, all of our tenants, I actually just sent a letter out last month to our tenants. I am so blessed by the people that are in this building. um, Not only have I grown professionally, but personally through all of the tenants, and building those relationships is so important. So we have a counselor who works primarily with first responders. We have someone that does acupuncture and parenting classes as well. We have a midwife, there's an engineer, a bookkeeper. We have a studio artist who is here. We have yoga studio, and then we have a massage therapist. We had someone here that worked for the Nature Conservancy, so she was very willing to help and volunteer her time as well on any nature gigs that we needed. So very grateful by the people that are here.
Well, and that expands the network and the knowledge and the visibility, right? The more people that are plugged in and engaged, even casually, right, running into the things that you all are doing that are in and around arts and culture, right? It benefits, particularly in a small community, right? If you have 2,000 residents in the town of Amherst, we haven't really talked about the county because the county intersects obviously at points too,
Right.
but but that has tremendous value. I remember there was a discussion that was a little bit of a back and forth. I mean, it was a very positive experience meeting with the board there at Second Stage, but there was a little bit of grist, I guess we'll say, a little bit of tension that sort of existed in and around the notion of what the organization was doing to be a viable organization in regards to its funding capacity, and in turn what the organization's aim was in regards to its cultural mission and impact.
Right.
And I think at the end of the day, um, the feeling was that the organization needed to be providing clear value, which we've just discussed, right? If we're sort of talking about output
Right.
and being visible and 1,000 people engaging in a community activity for Halloween, or space being provided in a small community where people can operate their small businesses or cultural nonprofit activity, that that is value, right? And then in turn that provides a capacity for the organization to do cultural activities like concert events or arts camps, etc. So how is that going right now? I'm just kind of curious how that exists, right? Because that was a little bit of tension that exists, and I think it's a conversation for every cultural institution to have.
Right.
Is how much, and we talk about here at the Academy too. We rent the space quite a bit. We have a lot of cultural partners that use the facility, but occasionally there's some sort of for-profit activity that happens.
Right.
And we can kind of live with that because it helps pay the bills.
Exactly.
So, I think it has to be balanced, but I do think it's an important thing. You have an asset, you have a building, you have space, and that space is valuable. I think you want to be careful with how you use it. But how is that? How is that balance existing right now for you guys?
So, honestly, I have been a yes person, right? That has been one of the big things for the last year. You want to use the space, you want to have a pageant, you want to do whatever. Yes, the answer to everything within reason is yes.
Yeah.
um, we had um, we've had Liberty University do like a dance here. Well, not even a dance. It was a gathering. I know that they can't do dances or anything, but they kind of had their end of the year gathering and event. So sorry. So I got some pushback from people not on our board, but in the community, saying you don't want colleges to be there. Um, I can say that they were phenomenal, and I have no reservations in having them back.
What was the thought process of not having colleges?
I guess, just the stereotypical colleges are gonna party, kinda thing. They're gonna be there and destroy your building and whatever. That's not the case. It was very far from that, actually. And I was kinda here for the first part of it just to make sure everything was good because I had had someone reach out to me about it, but it was great. We've got the one thing that we have discussed as a board is what I am putting in the newsletter and advertising for, and just making sure that we're not advertising for anything that is. I'm happy to advertise for nonprofits having an event like we had the candlelight vigil here for the domestic violence group. Um, we're the board is great advertising for something like that, but if we have a political party here for an event, we're choosing to not we're not they're just renting the space. It has nothing to do with Second Stage, basically, is what I'm getting at there.
Yeah, we have that bit of a back and forth here. We have systems in place of what sort of lands into what we promote and what we don't promote. Very often, it does usually move along the line of what is the activity, right? If it's a cultural activity, in some degree, it makes sense. And the way that we frame that is through basically these programs, our residency program and our performance partner programs. And those programs, like one of the benefits of those programs is that there is additional visibility within our marketing materials and information that goes out. And that helps us divide a little bit between, what we feel is part of the organization's identity as a cultural nonprofit versus what is our identity as a facility and space, which is sometimes the same and sometimes it's different. And so, yeah, I do think, there are conversations to have there in regards to what benefits the institution in regards to promoting what's there and as a cultural institution, and what's benefiting the organization just financially, right, as somebody renting the space and then taking responsibility themselves for
Well, and
publicizing it.
I'm happy to allow anyone to rent the space. It's just a
Sure.
matter of what we're helping to advertise with, and making sure that we stay in our lane.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely.
Uh,
So before we hit record on the podcast, we were touching base a little bit. And one of the things that I have been, again, I want to give Jesse a lot of credit here as we're talking about this, because I think so much of what happens with organizations and smaller communities is that there's a little bit of getting lucky in regards to the organization's output and success, and that is having the people, right, that have the energy and the drive to really be running uphill most of the time. It's really a hard thing to do. There are lots of obstacles that exist for cultural nonprofit organizations in regards to funding and capacity, and we've talked quite a bit about that on the podcast over the last year, and certainly articles on our blog as well about that. But they got really lucky. They have an individual like Jesse who is dedicated, who has a ton of energy, is putting a ton of time into it. But she also just got back from a vacation and spoke to how hard it was to take a vacation.
yeah.
So Jesse, you're a year into it now, and talk to me a little bit about your work hours and what it was like to try to step away for a week, and your sort of long-term aims and goals with the organization in regards to what it means for you personally.
Oh, thank you. Um, so yeah, I in March, my daughter and I went away for a weekend, and even that was difficult. Just making sure that everything is flowing, tenants are taken care of, upcoming events are being promoted and they're taken care of. So I just knew that I needed a break. As you said, running full steam ahead, right? And I decided to take a week in vacation with my family, so that I could just take a little breather. I was still checking emails and phone messages and all of that throughout the week, but it is very nice to be able to step away. Work hours have been during the day, night, early morning, any and every time that it can be, just to
Yeah.
make sure that the job gets done and it's done well. Um, and I know that I'm going to be playing catch up this week,
Yeah.
which is fine. But it was very enlightening for me to know that everything is still intact when I come back. I know I've got a lot waiting for me and a lot to do and catch up on. But I also planned this week away. So there wasn't a lot of outside activity going on last week for someone else to have to pick up for. And my one of my biggest goals was implementing software systems and systems that are in place so that if I am away, board members will be able to know what's going on. They can go into the email, they can go into my calendar and see what's going on. And also, technology is great, and being able to be in Florida and look at my calendar and be able to answer questions for people if they have those.
Jesse, would that be your advice to somebody in a situation like yours, coming into a smaller community arts organization and finding that it needs a jump start? Do you feel like that you've mentioned systems a couple times? Do you feel that would be something you advise would be one of the most important top priorities, is to put in
Absolutely.
place those systems?
Absolutely. Being the only employee here, I don't need to know everything, and I don't need to do everything on my own. I need to create systems so that others know what's happening. And so that I'm able to take those systems and utilize them to their capacity. Which I still have a ways to go on that just because I don't have time to actually put all of the data into one system. So I'm going back and forth between a few. But it's coming.
As long as it's coming, right? That's the thing.
Always a work in progress,
As
I
long as
think.
it's moving forward.
Well, as
You
soon
know,
as we get one thing done, then technology changes a little bit and we have to go through and redo. So,
sure,
yeah.
sure.
Well, we actually had, I planned this vacation and I knew that, I would have like 3 weeks to get everything off of my desk and clear and feel like I had a clean slate for going on vacation. But we had a fraudulent, it's called a testing scheme or a testing scam,
Yeah.
come through, and there were 23,000 credit card transactions that processed through our account on June 15th.
Oh,
So that took literally a full week of my time and everything else had to set to the side. And then we had a sewer backup. So that was another week. And it's having an old building and being a nonprofit and having all of the things coming at you that you're not even like particularly thinking about happening,
yeah. It's always
um,
that stuff.
can be really difficult and unfortunately time consuming. So those things are a little bit difficult to deal with, but we get through.
Yeah. One of the things that I have found with peers, friends, colleagues who find themselves in small organizations where they're the only staff member is that I feel that one of the hardest things that often happens is that the particularly in arts and culture where what you do is so public, there are things that are very visible, right, that happen, and then there's a ton that's invisible, right, that is not seen, right, dealing with credit card fraud and most people are, not dealing with whatever's going on with the building, but that's still extraordinarily time consuming. But what they're very aware of is the stuff that's really visible and that's happening outside. And so I find very often if that it can be a pressure point with the board, right? In this sort of expectation of what one individual is supposed to be doing at any given point, right? And there can often be a disconnection and kind of understanding all the invisible that comes with the visible.
Right.
Um, and we spoke to that during the strategic planning process, and we spoke to that in your position. And it's one thing to speak to it; it's another thing to sort of exist with it. Um, but it does sound like you do an excellent job of communicating, of talking about what's going on. You've talked a lot about systems that are in place to make sure that work is being executed and done with one staff member. How is that balance? How are you finding that balance right now? That balance of the invisible and the visible work that you do as a
Um,
single
it's
employee.
a lot better now. And I even early on said we needed to get programs in place that are ongoing. So we have like a monthly second Saturdays art workshop. It's every second Saturday, and we do some form of art. It's always $10, but some quality form of art. Um, that is something I have to plan a little bit every month for, but I already know that it's coming. So it's easier. The public can see that that's happening, which is great. But I don't have all of the initial work for that. So my hope is behind the scenes, nobody saw that I was even away. Unless you got a message saying I was out of the office,
Yeah.
then or you called and got my voicemail. But if it was something that was urgent, of course I would call right back. Um, so hopefully it wasn't even known that that was happening. Things like the sewer backup and all of that consumed a lot of my time, but it was just a constant juggle of getting things done that were necessary here and dealing with that, and putting those people in the places that they need to be and make sure that I'm overseeing everything, as far as that's concerned, or being in the middle of a show and going downstairs to take care of business.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Just juggling it all.
Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, and that is
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I so much of this is stamina too. how are you doing? I'm gonna ask that. It's a loaded
I am
question, right? How are you
I am
doing?
actually good. I think that events are my drive for sure. I'm a people person. I want people around. I want this organization to be successful. So when I have events and I have people here and we have sold out shows or community events or even rentals, that's my drive. That's people are coming in. That's what makes me happy. It's almost like it's my baby, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, but it's
Refuels
also
you.
important to have that break and to have time with your family and all of that. So it's just trying to find the proper balance. Um, and the big things that are arrows coming from the outside that you're not anticipating are the things that are the hardest, I think. I can anticipate all of the business stuff. I can't anticipate all of the other issues that are at hand.
Yeah,
Um,
which it always comes back down to the capacity. There's been a theme over the last few podcasts where we talked a lot about facilities, and facilities are just these beasts that are constantly throwing stuff at you that
right.
we're not anticipating or expecting, both logistically as well as financially. We talked a little bit in the strategic plan. We were working on it too. Trying to build up some sort of facilities fund. For you all, I would not expect that to have been done yet a year into your time. But what are you all thinking right now, kind of long term, to try to help with some of those things that are unexpected, like facility breakdowns and
Yeah. So one of the things that we've talked a lot about, and starting another fiscal year now, we'll be talking about later this week in our next board meeting, is trying to figure out ways to get annual sponsors in. Um, we kind of implemented it a little bit last year, but we just don't have the or didn't have the manpower to go out and actually solicit businesses. That's one of the things that I found at Amherst is it is a an actual conversation kind of
it's
town.
true. It's true everywhere, Jesse, though. It's true everywhere. It's relationships and yeah.
It is relationships, and that's great. It's not a downfall. It just takes manpower to be able to do that. Um, One of the big things that I've done is I feel like partnerships are huge. Um, Being one organization, you can make an impact, but you always make a bigger impact in groups. So I've tried to create partners on all of the events that we do. And hopefully our sponsors will continue to grow. We obviously still rely heavily on donations from our community. But the more sponsors we have, the bigger our events can be, the more events we can have, and the bigger our outreach can be as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think you're really smart to think about partnerships. And I think if anybody gets, from this too, I think thinking about in a small community, right, it does two things at the same time. If you've got those partners, right, it's expanding your network and your support systems. And B, it makes the lift easier because you've got people that are helping you do it. And I think that thinking of corporate partners in a similar way is smart. I think that very often, right, the engagement sponsors have in cultural activities very often operates in some sort of way that is also beneficial to them. Sometimes that's more philanthropic. It can be something that's oriented around enriching the community and making the community a nice place where they're doing business, that the community is benefiting. Sometimes it's visibility, and sometimes it's also corporate initiatives, right? Something that the corporation or the business wants to accomplish, and it lines up with the activity that you're doing. But to Jesse's earlier point, she's busy dealing with all of the functions and activities that are going on in the building. She's dealing with the surprise things, not things that aren't surprising. And at the end of the day, and I will just say this to any board member of a small community arts organization out there, fundraising is a full-time job. And if you are doing all of those other functions within the organization, it's going to be really difficult for you to go out and fundraise. Because to Jesse's point, it's absolutely true. It is relationships, it is conversations, and that conversations take time. Relationships take time, and it is the sort of painful reality, right? That larger organizations can raise more money because they have people dedicated to raising money, and that is why it's possible, right? It's not because they're smarter or harder working or better at what they're doing, and it's just that they have higher capacity and more people.
Right.
And I would say, for boards, it is really in a small community, those boards really have to think about how they are aiding that, right? They have to be additional manpower in that fundraising. And I just will say, because I see this happen over and over and over again, boards with single staff members who are operating a building or facilitating programs, you must be engaged in fundraising. You have to be. You will not. You
Mhm.
have to be. There isn't a choice there. That's a part of your function. It's a part of what you do. And we don't need to speak to Second Stage. I'm not sure what the circumstances is, and I'm not going to put Jesse in a position to tell me what that is right now. But I will say to anybody listening, that it is really critical that the board is involved in that. I'm aware of an organization here in the city of Lynchburg that's small right now that's struggling, and their board, partially it's that the board doesn't really understand their role in that, and putting extra pressure on the staff that doesn't have the time and capacity to handle it. And so,
Yeah.
um, so I just will say that, I think that's really important. And what's clear that Jesse's doing an excellent job of, which is her job, is that her job is to increase the value of the organization so it's easier to fundraise for. So when she goes out, she can say, yeah, we had 1,000 people at at this event in October. We're providing space to all these different organizations and individuals in the community. We are engaging our youth, right, which is something for the town of Amherst, which is really important. And so, that's her job. Her job is to is to increase the value of what is there so that it can be fundraised for. And it's really important that the board engages in that as much as possible.
Yeah.
Um, so Jesse, as we're kind of wrapping up here, I would love to sort of get your thoughts on two final questions. One is what do you kind of see ahead? What's next? What you've been there
More.
about a year, and
Just more.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
More arts programs, more theater. There's lots in store for the rest of this year, actually, which is really exciting. Um, More opportunities for community engagement is huge for me. I am big on relationships. Relationships are everything. And I want people to look at Second Stage as kind of a community hub for Amherst. There's no other organization like us around that I'm aware of. And I want us to be a priority venue. At some point in the future, I'd love to have weddings here. If anybody that's listening has been in our main hall, it's gorgeous. And I think just a really unique, quaint space that is really great for any kind of gatherings or banquets or community events. There's been a lot of interest online. People don't know that we exist, so I throw it out there on repeat, and people are so grateful to have us as an option once they learn about it. So I think it's just getting the word out there, and having more of a good thing is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing just to throw out there too for those in communities where you may have a building or a space that needs, could be repurposed. There is a whole other story for another time too of how
Yeah.
this organization came to be, which is a pretty incredible story. And Sonny Monk, your board president, is I'm a big fan of. And there was this church and it was empty and they were going to rip it down, and they fought and worked to have it turned into a cultural home for a cultural institution. And 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 so, we've gotten to summer programs, some other things, but there's live music happening in the space regularly. But one of the other things I want to point out is there's also a coffee shop there.
Yes, I was going to mention that earlier,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah, we have Baines Books and Coffee, which brings in a ton of people. And we've had a lot of people enter the building for events and not realize that there's a coffee shop here. So yes, they are open, and yes, they are open to the public. You don't have to be a member of anything to come and visit any of our tenants or even our organization.
Well, and again, really smart, right? I mean, this is they're renting the space, correct? And then they are bringing people regularly to the building, right? And that is, again, traffic is really helpful to cultural institutions in regards to building awareness
Yeah.
and engagement. And then and there's sometimes live performance activity that happens in the coffee shop as well, correct?
Um, it's more in the main hall, which is adjacent to the coffee shop. So they kind of open up to one big area.
So it
Uh,
serves both. Got it.
so it serves both. Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Jesse, I always end these with advice that you might
Oh,
be able to give. So you are a year in now, and there's somebody out there. They are stepping into something very similar to what you've stepped into. There is, there's opportunity, but it's the capacity is small, and it's a little bit starting from scratch. Looking back a year now, what advice would you give somebody stepping into something similar to what you have found here in Amherst?
remember your why. Like, why are you in this position? Why is this position the right one for you? Um, and don't deviate from it. I knew that I wanted to find a way to give back to the community, to do fun things. I now have the space to let my creativity shine, give back, and see what the future holds. Be able to partner, and just take the punches as they come because you never know what may come from it.
Just I like that. I am often having to remind myself we can get really pulled down into the grind of the day to day,
Mhm.
and it is really important to soak up the rewards of operating a cultural institution, right? And I think at a time where less and less pulls us together to share real space in real time, um, to sort of stand in the middle of that when it's happening and say, well, I did this, right? I did this. I made this happen is a really important thing to take time for because I think it replenishes you and helps you kind of push through the next challenge that will inevitably arise. Um, so Jesse, I just have been really impressed. I wanted to talk to you a year
Thank
out.
you.
I can't. I really mean it. I for anyone listening, I was really concerned. I was really concerned about Second Stage's ability to kind of pull themselves up from after what COVID did, which was a punch in the mouth to many organizations. But to now see I get these emails and just the volume of activity. But I think knowing too some of these things that Jesse shared today, right? Things that can be repeated, right? That and systems in place for the repetition of these particular things. Making sure to find partners for activities and things that you do to help lift the load and also help build the partnerships that you need within a community to help sustain it over time.
Right.
Um, so just happy. When
Thank
is the year? When is the year anniversary? How long have you been there? Have we hit that year yet? Is it's probably close,
I
right?
think it's coming up this week. I was actually looking at that.
Oh wow! So we hit it. We hit it pretty close to. That's great.
I know, how ironic.
It's perfect. It's perfect. Exactly what I wanted actually, because I was really kind of curious to talk to a leader with 1 year in and what that looks and feels like.
Yeah,
So Jesse, thank
you're right
you.
there.
Yeah, thank you so much for this, and continue to root you on, and for anybody out there, Jesse, what's y'all's website?
Second Stage Amherst at sorry, .org. It's
.org. Yeah,
Amherst, AMHERST .org.
and check them out. I think particularly anyone out there in a community who's looking to repurpose space and figuring out how to operate in a small town, and how to create a model that might work. You also need a Jesse, though. I'll share too.
Oh,
You need somebody who's got a lot of energy and is really dedicated. And please help them as much as possible because they cannot do it all. So that's also really important. Well,
yeah.
Jesse, thank you
Well,
so
thank you.
much. I really appreciate
I
this.
I appreciate you as well, and if anyone listening, wants to partner in any kind of way, or bounce ideas off of each other, please reach out.
Yes, community networking. Know that you're not alone. Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you.
After talking to Jesse, I wanted to reflect a little bit on this 1 year mark, and it's hard to believe that we have hit that 1 year mark of Small Town Big Arts. The genesis of this project came out of a sabbatical I took last year, and the sabbatical was needed to help me navigate the stress and strain of a tumultuous number of years. And this wasn't just COVID-19, but also dramatic changes to my organization prior to the pandemic. There was a staff overhaul, a multi-million dollar capital campaign, and ultimately a quadrupling of the organizational output. All of this, along with the fact that I had really an unhealthy relationship with my job in which too much of my personal identity was tied to my work. This month's episode was prompted by the genesis of Small Town Big Arts, but also by my recent observations of a number of smaller cultural nonprofits in my own community quickly burning through their leadership. I think what was great to hear from Jessie is that she is revitalizing herself by touching on the mission and making sure that she knows why she's there and what she's doing. But her board, her community needs to take care of her. This is really important because if we don't, we're going to end up burning through this really valuable leadership, which really, quite frankly, is doing more work than what they're being paid for, and providing way more value than what they're being provided. So, so we need to pay attention to this. And today, I want to touch on how we might want to take care of ourselves when we're delivering the arts in small town America. Um, I recently incorporated a new routine into my daily life, and that's reading a short passage of an advice book called The Daily Stoic. And I do this each morning after my workout. And this book draws wisdom from the ancient practice of Stoicism, which was prevalent in Greece and Rome during the 4th and 3rd centuries BC. This new habit has proven to be quite helpful for me, especially considering the nature of my work in the nonprofit sector. The fundamental philosophy behind Stoicism is that while we have no control over what happens to us, we can always control how we respond. It involves acknowledging that we exist in a world we cannot change, but we can adapt ourselves and our approach to navigate the circumstances beyond our control. It is important to make decisions with that knowledge and to know that no matter how brilliant we may be, without a massive endowment or a level of benefactors that far exceeds the national average for our population size, this job is one of struggle. Lately, I've been imagining that my job is like holding up a massive rock. It isn't about changing this unchangeable rock. I can't change that. It is about holding it up as long as I can and doing the best I can to pass it off to someone else before it hits the ground. And even if I am passing it off momentarily, which I did during my sabbatical, it's necessary. Even better, I try to get this rock as high over my head as possible before my time is up. My time being my time running my organization, my time delivering the mission here within my community. With all that said, it will remain a heavy rock. As I stated earlier, this rock, this nonprofit cultural institution, right, is just going to be heavy. It will remain heavy, and that can't be changed. Gravity will be pulling it down, and at some point, right, someone else with fresh arms will need to take over, right? Jesse's going to go, and she's going to work, and she's going to keep doing that as long as she can. And I believe in Jesse's stamina. I think she can go for a while, but she can't go forever. And we really need to take care of these cultural institutions because the way that they're set up, right, these nonprofit organizations in the free market in America, it's just really tough. And there's never quite enough dollars, and there's never quite enough people. But we must keep going. And I take pride in having the strength to hold up that rock as long as I can. But I also know that I will have to pass it off, and I think that that's okay. And that could be momentarily to your board, or it could be the day that you pass it off to somebody new with energy and vitality who can continue to carry the torch forward. So ultimately, at the end of the day, please be kind to yourself. I've shared lots of examples on the site and through the podcast of small town success stories. However, don't be misled. Each of these individuals is struggling in their own way. They're just holding the rock a bit higher or have managed to push the rock higher up the hill if we think of like Sisyphus. Gravity is still pushing down on them, and their success and heroism are acts of endurance, but they have not solved the larger problems, and they may not be able to. So as you continue the work, focus on one moment at a time and solve today's problems for your community and organization. Just work on lifting the rock a bit higher, and don't feel like a failure when gravity inevitably shows up, because it will, and it does for everyone. But you just keep showing up and you keep doing it because it's really, really important that communities have arts organizations. It's everything, right? It's everything. It's about connecting. It's having the ability to express oneself. youth development, economic development, all of it. So thank you for all you do 1 year into Small Town Big Arts. I look forward to the year ahead. We're going to continue to do interviews, provide resources, and it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Small Town Big Arts. Remember to rate and review us and share with your friends. To learn more, visit us at smalltownbigarts.com. Until next time, I'm your host, Geoffrey Kershner.